8:31 p.m. Eastern Wednesday night. Iran's military just announced a new wave of drone strikes on a U.S. base in Kuwait. The target, Camp Doha, ammunition storage, logistics sites, western Kuwait. Tasnim news agency carried the claim first. Then, Kuwait's own military confirmed it was intercepting hostile drones. Again, this is not the first time this month. It is not even the fifth. Signal number one, the ceasefire that was supposed to end this war is functionally dead, and almost nobody watching cable news tonight understands why. Here's what nobody is telling you. The deal that was supposed to stop all of this was 1.5 pages long. That's it. A page and a half, signed by 2 presidents in a palace in France, and everyone called it historic. Let's rewind, because the timeline matters more than the headline. On February 28th, 2026, President Trump announced what he called major combat operations against Iran. Joint American and Israeli strikes hit military, government, and infrastructure sites across the country. Weeks of strikes followed. Then, in April, something unusual happened. Diplomats showed up in Islamabad, a 300-member American delegation, Vice President J.D. Vance leading it, flanked by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, a 70-member Iranian team led by Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Pakistan hosted, Pakistan mediated, and that detail matters more than you think. Because there was a third party in this room the entire time, quietly shuttling messages between 2 governments that would not sit at the same table. We'll come back to that. Keep it in your head. By mid-June, the 2 sides had something on paper, a memorandum of understanding, 14 points, signed in what officials called the Islamabad Memorandum. It called for a 60-day ceasefire. It called for Iran to keep the Strait of Hormuz open to commercial shipping. It called for sanctions relief, unfrozen assets, and the start of real nuclear talks. Vice President Vance himself admitted the document was, in his words, a very general one. That vagueness was not an accident. It was the price of getting anything signed at all, and it became the crack that broke the entire structure. Here's the secret offer buried inside the fine print. The MoU never actually banned Iran from charging ships to pass through Hormuz. It only said Iran had to use its best efforts for safe passage, free of charge, for 60 days. After that, the door was left open. Iran read that as permission to eventually control the strait. Washington read it as a temporary grace period. 2 governments signed the same sentence and walked away with 2 different wars in their heads. Just over a week after the ink dried, Iran launched a drone strike on a commercial vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. The United States called it a violation. Iran called it enforcement of its own terms. And that is the pattern that has repeated, almost mechanically, for over a month now. Iran hits shipping, the U.S. strikes back, Iran retaliates against American bases scattered across the Gulf, Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, sometimes all 3 in the same night. By early June, a Kuwait attack had already killed 1 person and injured 63 others, according to Kuwaiti officials, with strikes tearing through the international airport itself, flights suspended, a blazing fire visible in videos geolocated by international news teams, rubble across the tarmac. That was weeks before tonight's strike on Camp Doha. Now here's the pivot. But here's the catch nobody wants to say out loud on air. President Trump himself has already declared this agreement dead. Not analysts, not pundits. The man who signed it. At a NATO summit in Ankara, after a fresh round of American strikes on Iran, Trump told reporters he believed the memorandum of understanding was, I'll quote, over. He said he might allow talks to continue. He also called them a waste of time. Days later, in an interview, he went further, describing memorandums of understanding in general as documents that simply don't mean much, whether you're dealing with a hostile government or an honorable one. Think about what that means. The president who brokered this deal is now the one publicly burying it, and yet the shuttle messages haven't stopped. That's the strange part. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi has confirmed more than once that he still receives direct messages from U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. He insists this does not mean Iran is negotiating. He insists there is no trust. He insists there is no basis for talks. But the messages keep arriving anyway. Through Oman, through Pakistan, through whatever channel still has a working phone line between Washington and Tehran. This is the shuttle diplomacy nobody is showing you on the nightly news. Not 2 leaders shaking hands. 2 governments passing notes through exhausted third parties, each one insisting publicly that they are not really talking. Now, remember that third party sitting quietly in the room back in Islamabad? Pakistan didn't just host a signing ceremony. It has stayed the go-between, the country absorbing the blame every time the deal it brokered collapses a little further. Every leaked detail, every disputed clause runs back through Islamabad's channel before it ever reaches a camera. That's signal number 2. When a ceasefire needs this many intermediaries just to stay half alive, it was never really a ceasefire. It was a pause with a translator. Inside Iran, there is another fight happening, one with far less patience for any deal at all. Iran's Assembly of Experts issued a statement in June calling the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz a strategic mistake. Hardline clerics demanded Iran's nuclear program stay completely off any negotiating table. Protesters aligned with Iran's principlist hardliners have publicly chanted against Araghchi and Ghalibaf, the very negotiators who signed the deal, accusing them of selling out the country. On the other side of this war, Israeli leadership has shown little appetite for restraint either, with strikes continuing alongside the American campaign since February. Two governments under pressure from their own hardliners, each one incentivized to look tough rather than look reasonable. That is the internal friction driving this entire war, far more than any single missile strike. Every time Iran launches drones at a Gulf base, Iranian hardliners get to say the fight continues. Every time the United States strikes back, American hawks get to say weakness was never the answer. Nobody in either capital is rewarded for de-escalating first. Now for the domino effect, because none of this stays contained to a runway in Kuwait. When Iran struck two tankers and hit a base in Kuwait back in mid-July, Brent crude oil didn't just rise. It spiked over 9.5% in a single day, settling above $83 a barrel, its biggest one-day jump in more than 6 years. That is not an abstract number on a financial channel. That is every gas pump, every airline ticket, every shipping container on Earth, getting more expensive within hours. The United States pulled non-emergency staff out of its embassy in the UAE. Consular appointments across the Gulf were canceled. NATO's own Secretary General publicly backed the American strikes as necessary. The Gulf Cooperation Council condemned Iran's attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait as a flagrant violation of sovereignty. This is what a fragile ceasefire breaking down actually looks like in real time. Not a single dramatic collapse, but oil markets flinching, embassies emptying, and small Gulf nations absorbing missiles meant for someone else's war. Camp Doha tonight is just the latest data point in a pattern that has cost real casualties already. Iranian strikes on Kuwait through this war have killed multiple American service members and Kuwaiti personnel, wounded dozens more, and in one documented incident even caused a friendly fire loss when Kuwaiti air defenses shot down American aircraft by mistake. That single detail tells you everything about how chaotic this theater has become. Allies shooting down allies in the confusion of drone swarms and missile barrages moving faster than anyone can identify a target. So where does that leave the diplomacy tonight? Officially, indirect messages are still moving. Witkoff to Araghchi, filtered through Oman or Pakistan, each side publicly denying it counts as talking. Unofficially, the man who signed the deal has already called it meaningless. The clerics inside Iran are demanding it be scrapped entirely. And a Gulf base just took another hit hours before this video went live. Here's what nobody is telling you plainly enough. A memorandum of understanding without enforcement was never a peace deal. It was a truce built on a sentence both sides could read two different ways, and that sentence is now the reason people are dying in Kuwait. The next 24 to 72 hours matter more than almost any stretch of this entire war. If the Witkoff-Araghchi channel produces something concrete, a real enforcement mechanism, not another vague page and a half, the ceasefire has a chance to be rebuilt into something that actually holds. If it doesn't, expect the same cycle to repeat. Another U.S. strike. Another Iranian retaliation against Bahrain, Jordan, or Kuwait. Another spike in oil prices rippling through every economy on the planet. Two governments, still technically bound by a document neither one fully trusts, are deciding in real time whether that document is worth saving. Right now, the messages are still moving. The missiles are still flying too. Peace or a wider war across the Gulf. That is the choice sitting on the table tonight, and neither Washington nor Tehran has made it yet.